Okay, so we got this New York Times article you sent over about Chinese electric car companies setting up shop in Europe. And it got me thinking, this is a really interesting angle on a much bigger story.
Yeah, this is about way more than just like tariffs and imports. This is a story about a global shift in like power dynamics and consumer habits and the future of cars as we know it.
Exactly. And one of the first things that jumped out at me were these big names we've all heard of, like BYD, Chery, even Geely, which owns Volvo. And these companies aren't just testing the waters, they're going all in building factories in Europe.
Which makes sense on like a strategic level, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, this move lets them avoid those huge EU tariffs on Chinese-made electric cars, but it's way more savvy than just dodging a cost. It's about planting your flag right in the heart of the European market.
It's like they're not just selling you a car, they're becoming your neighbor, right? It's about understanding the customer and building relationships. And speaking of which, did you catch that BYD sponsorship during the Euro Cup?
Genius marketing, Riker. Millions of people watching football see the BYD logo right next to their favorite players, and suddenly this brand they might not know that well feels familiar. It feels European.
It's smart. It's playing the long game and building trust. On the surface, this all feels like a win-win, right? Europe gets investment, jobs, new technology, and China gets direct access to a huge market.
Yeah, but like with anything this complex, there's always another layer. I mean, this move has the potential to really shake things up for European car companies like Volkswagen, Peugeot, Renault, all of whom are already struggling to transition to electric.
It's like having some hot new restaurant open across the street. You want to support the place, you know? But this new spot might have some amazing dishes. You got to stay competitive.
Right, and then the question becomes, is this going to lead to more collaboration like we saw in the 90s with joint ventures, or is this going to become a fight to the death? Only time will tell.
And a specific example of this whole thing playing out in real time that really caught my eye was this new BYD factory in Szeged, Hungary.
Yeah.
I had to look it up on a map, but it's a beautiful city.
Yeah.
Who knew it would become this, like, unlikely hub for Chinese electric car
It
production?
all comes back to the supply chain, right?
Yeah.
Moving production closer to consumers means fewer of those disruptions we saw during the pandemic, faster shipping times, and it could mean lower prices for consumers in the long run.
So this directly impacts everyone listening to this right now. It's not just about which companies are winning, it's about what kind of car you'll be driving in the future and how much it'll cost. But why Hungary? Why not Germany or France? They got way more established auto industries.
Well, Hungary offers a different kind of advantage. Think lower labor costs and a government that's incredibly eager to attract foreign investment, especially in these cutting-edge sectors like electric vehicles.
Basically, they're rolling out the red carpet for companies like BYD with tax breaks incentives, the whole 9 yards.
Exactly, and we're seeing this trend across a bunch of industries, not just cars. Companies are moving away from this idea of one central hub for manufacturing and bringing things closer to their customers.
So Seged, it's like a perfect example of this larger global shift in manufacturing and trade. This one decision by BYD to set up shop in Hungary has these ripple effects that are felt way beyond the city limits.
Absolutely. It really highlights how interconnected everything is these days. Decisions made on one side of the planet have very real impacts on people's lives thousands of miles away.
It makes you think about the bigger picture, doesn't it? And speaking of the bigger picture, we can't talk about the European car market without talking about the elephant in the room, the very large, very powerful German car industry.
Right, Germany.
Uh,
Home Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Audi, some of the most legendary car brands in history. They have this reputation for incredible engineering. But they're also deeply invested in China themselves.
hmm.
Factories, joint ventures, the whole deal.
So they're in this really interesting position. They don't want to jeopardize all that business they have going on in China, but they also don't want to lose their dominance in their own backyard, especially with all these new competitors showing up.
It's a tough spot to be in for sure. And German consumers are famous for their brand loyalty. Remember when Berlin cut those EV subsidies a while back?
Yeah.
Sales tanked, even for German brands.
Which goes to show just how much brand loyalty matters in this market. So how are Chinese car companies going to break through all that? What are they bringing to the table?
Well, they're not afraid of a challenge, that's for sure. They're coming in hot with this like cutting-edge tech, crazy battery ranges you wouldn't believe, super fast charging, basically addressing every concern people have about EVs head on.
So it's not just about offering a cheaper car. It's about pushing the boundaries of what an EV can be.
You got it. And it's not just the mainstream market either. We're seeing Chinese brands like Neo, Xpeng. These are like the new kids on the block, and they're aiming straight for the luxury market, going head-to-head with Tesla, Audi, even Mercedes-Benz.
Now, that's ambitious. But brand perception, that's something that takes time to build.
Hmm.
Can Chinese car makers really overcome those stereotypes about quality and reliability?
Look at what happened in the tech world. Brands like Huawei and Xiaomi, they basically flipped the script. Now, made in China can absolutely mean high quality and cutting edge innovation.
It's like anything else, right?
Yeah.
Judge the product, not the label. But let's be real for a second here. Safety, that's non-negotiable, especially for European drivers. They're not going to compromise on that just because a car has some fancy tech features.
100%. And yeah, Chinese car makers, they know this. They're putting a ton of resources into not just meeting, but exceeding those really strict European safety standards.
Yeah.
It's like the price of admission to do business over there.
They're playing by the rules, which brings up this whole other fascinating angle to this whole thing, the geopolitical stuff. I mean, it's got to be like walking a tightrope for Europe, right? Trying to reduce their dependence on China, but then also welcoming them with open arms, especially when it comes to something as important as electric vehicles.
It's a balancing act, no doubt, and it's not just Europe either.
Yeah.
The U.S. is wrestling with this same dilemma right now, trying to ramp up domestic EV production while also navigating this complex relationship with China.
So for our listeners who are following this story, maybe picturing themselves behind the wheel of a new EV sometime soon, what's the key takeaway here?
I think the biggest thing is this. The landscape is changing fast. The brands that dominated the old era of gas-powered cars, they might not be the ones calling the shots in the electric age.
So don't get stuck in the past. Keep an open mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's all about being informed, right? Pay attention to what's under the hood, the technology, the safety features, and yeah, even where a car is made.
Because ultimately where a car comes from is just one piece of the puzzle. What really matters is the innovation, who's pushing the limits and who's offering the best value.
100%. And I think you could argue that this new wave of Chinese car makers, it's actually a good thing for the European market.
Yeah.
A little healthy competition can really shake things up and lead to some amazing advancements for everyone.
It's like a wake-up call, right? They can't just cruise on reputation alone. They actually have to bring their A game if they want to compete with these new companies.
It's good news for anyone who loves cars because at the end of the day, more competition means a better product for the consumer, better technology, hopefully lower prices. And I think the really interesting thing to watch here is going to be the partnerships, the collaborations that come out of all this.
Oh, I love a good plot twist. Tell me more.
Well, we're already starting to see it. Like Ford just announced they're going to use batteries from CATL, which is a huge Chinese company,
Yeah.
in some of their new electric vehicles.
So even with all this competition, there's this understanding that sometimes you got to team up, even with your rivals, to stay ahead of the game.
It's like this crazy high-stakes chess match where everyone's trying to outmaneuver each other.
So to wrap things up for our listeners out there, it sounds like we're at this really pivotal moment in the car industry.
No doubt. This whole wave of Chinese automakers coming into Europe, it's unlike anything we've ever seen. It's going to be fascinating to see how it all plays out.
So basically, the next time you see a cool new EV on the road, don't assume you know who made it. Do a little research. You might be surprised what you find. And that's it for today's deep dive. Until next time, keep those questions coming.